So basically what you're telling me now, I should have a Mina Shahab friend in order for me to sign a contract with an insurance.
It's a good story.
Okay,
I like
no,
it.
you do
I
not.
would
I'm
really
sorry,
enjoy
you
it.
do not get to discount a lived experience and somebody who's come and told the story and said it never happened.
I'm happy you wasted your money.
Well, first of all, welcome everyone to Taka Talks, and this is season 3. And today we have a very exciting episode. We have with us, ladies first, Meena Sahib, who is a bilingual insurance expert with over 15 years of experience in North America and the GCC, specializing in digital and operational transformations across all lines of business. Now, she's worked closely with insurers, brokers, startups, and solution providers, driving commercial growth and operational excellence. I also happen to know that Meena is extremely passionate about advancing women in the insurance industry, part of her network. Please do speak about this sometime during this podcast. We have with us as well Colleen O'Flynn. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's an English name and yet I'm mispronouncing it. Colleen O'Flynn, who is the general partner of Noria Capital. He brings over 30 years of diverse experience in banking, broking, and insurance with a strong international leadership background. He champions innovation at the intersection of insurance and technology as an active insurer tech investor and consultant. So, welcome both of you. I'm going to ask Meena to please tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience, and then we'll hand it over to Colleen.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Meena Sahib. I have been in the insurance industry. I graduated university and took a deep dive into the insurance industry. I started my career in claims in North America, and then I moved to the UAE about 12 years ago, and that's where I got to kind of get involved with the operational side of the business. And operations for me meant really getting involved all the way from distribution to underwriting to claims to digital transformation. And I worked with multiple insurers, brokers, and then I moved into the vendor side, actually, on this side of the world. And that's where I also got more regional exposure. And also got involved in product development, providing solutions to the market. And actually, last year, I decided to open up my own consultancy. So now I consult for insurers and insurance businesses in the region. And that's really where I take the transformational initiatives or transformational strategy that insurers really want to get involved in and help them execute it on the ground. I'm also, obviously, you mentioned I'm the founder of the Women in Insurance Network. I'm passionate actually about advancing the insurance industry in the region as a whole, but women play a big part. So we organized last year the first conference for the Women in Insurance Network. This year we're having our second, and actually, Shireen, you're going to be one of our speakers. So we're very excited to have you.
Thank you so much for that. Over to you, Colleen.
Thank you very much, Shireen. Firstly, it's a pleasure to be here, and Meena, thanks very much for sharing. It's going to be hard to follow that. So I've been involved in the insurance industry for a long time, but financial services really since I left college, and I'm an insurer. I mean, probably until maybe 6-7 years ago, I would have said I was a dinosaur type insurer. I considered the risks, the numbers. I played it safe, as insurers do. But it was impossible to ignore the fact that insurtech was emerging all around us, and it was starting to change the game. And if partnered properly, really offered distinct advantages. And so I was very lucky to work with a company called Generali for a long part of my career. A really excellent employer. They placed a fantastic trust in their leaders, and they placed me in my last position in Hong Kong, which was pre-COVID. And so I was immersed in probably the highest tech of tech, because you were blitzed by Singapore, by China, even in the Hong Kong domestic market. There was just a huge amount of technology being used because it was so competitive. And it whetted my appetite. And I started to invest originally through Generali, and then in a personal capacity. And currently I'm an active investor really, in insurtech, international and domestic. but very specifically focused on the MENA region. So if it's an international technology company, we land them in MENA. If it's a MENA company, we try to incubate and grow it. And we have some pretty successful stories. Probably our biggest story is now an emerging story in Saudi, so one to watch.
Fantastic. We're gonna have to talk more about that in a minute. So today we come together to discuss a news article that I found. So I always get lots of news articles about insurance companies in my news feed. And this article specifically, the title of the article is State Farm pays $65 million to settle life insurance overcharge lawsuit. Now, the story goes that State Farm, they have this life insurance policy and people were paying for it, etc. And I believe it's some kind of a whole life insurance policy, which also has, an investment portion in that policy. Now, what happened was the accusers, so the plaintiffs, they said that State Farm overcharged them because when they were calculating the premiums, they used mortality tables that were many, many years old, that were outdated. All right. And so the premise is that the mortality tables that they should have used showed, I guess, lower mortality rates, and theoretically insurance should have been cheaper, so State Farm overcharged them. And the judge actually found, or did the judge found, or did they settle the class action? I'm not really sure. I think they settled. So State Farm said, okay, we're not admitting fault, but we don't want to deal with this lawsuit. We'll settle it. We'll pay you some amount of money. And the settlement ended up being $65 million. And it will be distributed to lawyers and part of the plaintiff and things like that. So the thing that really struck me was two things, right? I was like, hold on. How in the world did they figure out that State Farm used the outdated mortality tables, right? Like, this is not information that, first of all, is publicly known. Now, as somebody in life insurance and who's building a life insurance vehicle myself, I know that for a fact that these mortality tables are proprietary data. So State Farm will never share this information with anybody. It's like this is their money in the bank, essentially, right? So how did they know they were using old mortality tables? I'm like, this is an inside job. And then fundamentally, how do you price insurance policies anyway? And why does this constitute overcharging? Can you not make the case to say that, hey, State Farm is just being more conservative? So I take a mortality table and I'm like, okay, this is what the mortality rates say. I'm just going to add 5% on top of these mortality tables just to be safe. Am I entitled to do it as an insurance company?
We'll be right back after the break.
Ready to unlock your financial future? Join the Taka Token airdrop and get rewarded. Sign up on Galaxy, complete missions and earn points. Points convert to Taka tokens in 2025. Don't miss out. Join the airdrop today.
Company? Helene, your thoughts?
You picked a very complex topic. Life products it's a mathematical formula, and it's a complex mathematical formula. I won't claim to understand it fully, but at a basic level, if I'm offering you a whole of life policy as an insurer, I believe, firstly, you're going to get your money when you die. That's a fact. The second thing is, I believe that I will make a profit until you die. So between the time you buy the policy and the time that you die, I should make a profit. No, it's modest profit. If I estimate that you're going to die earlier and you die later, I make a bigger profit. And if I deliberately estimate that you're going to die earlier and I price it for that, then I'm pretty much guaranteeing myself a decent profit. And so if that could be proved, which I assume to an extent it has been, I mean, it would be enormously difficult to prove it. But I guess the insurer must have felt that there was either a moral obligation, which in fairness, someone like State Farm, as big as they are, could very well make a payout based on a moral obligation rather than necessarily a legal one. Or maybe they felt that there was a liability. But if they chose to pay, it's unlikely that there was nothing wrong. This is probably what I would say. And it doesn't really matter if they used mortality tables that were old, or it doesn't matter. I mean, if the client was not being treated fairly, I think that there's an obligation on any insurer, because we offer a social benefit, right? It's not just a commercial benefit for our shareholders, it's a social benefit for society. then we should actually make a moral choice and say, yeah, I can give you this portion back, or defend your position, you know.
I think
that's
also
interesting.
sorry, Shireen, I think also the plaintiffs were saying that the rating factors were not clearly stated in the policy wording, right? So I think in the policy wording, it was mortality ratings as per sex, gender, and cost of insurance. And what they had basically argued is that, you know, there needs to be more clarity or visibility on what kind of factors were being used in this calculation to determine the mortality rate at all. So I think there was a kind of a call from the plaintiffs on more visibility on how the ratings were determined. And that's a fair, you know, I think that's a fair point from a consumer perspective, right? To have more visibility on rating hikes.
I think it's fair as well, but I do think that anyone that's purchasing a policy like this is advised, and I think there's an obligation on the intermediary to do the fact find and to understand all of the dynamics of the product before they bring it to a client or a customer. And holding the carrier responsible in an intermediated transaction is unfair. It's unfair on rating factors or on the small print in the policy, but on the overall pricing and on the, I suppose, the predicted profit on their pricing versus the actual profit on their pricing, I think then it's a no-brainer. The carrier should be liable, or the carrier should pay up if they weren't accurate.
Okay, you guys have just mentioned a bunch of different things. So number one, on the role of the brokers, right, the intermediaries in this case, you're saying, well, the brokers should do this. Essentially, what I understood is the brokers should do their jobs. You know, they should be helping people understand, and they should be somehow, you know, figuring out whether these ratings make sense, etc. But inherently, the system doesn't work that way, because at the end of the day, who pays the brokers is the insurance company, right? So the insurance companies don't exist anymore. No?
No, that's not. Well, I mean, who hands them the cash is the insurance company, but who pays the broker is the client.
True, but at the end of the day, without the insurance products, there's nothing to sell, essentially. And so if the insurance company has more power over the broker in this case, because if they say, well, you are no longer representing us, you can no longer as a broker sell our products, then the broker has no recourse. At the end of the day, the insurance company has more power. So the system it feels to me a little bit rigged. And add to that, lots of people feel, and I don't know if this is borne out in data or not, that insurance companies are oligopolies, right? And they kind of try to, like, with their market power, they kind of a little bit try to price match one another. So then how do we as consumers go about that, and how do we sort this out?
I totally
I think
disagree with what you just said.
oh, sorry, I'll let
I mean,
Shireen go first.
I'm sorry, Mina, but there's just two things. Firstly, a broker has a responsibility to their customer, and the broker has to give them more than one quote. So the broker doesn't represent any individual insurance company. And secondly, if a broker doesn't sell, then an insurance company doesn't get income, right? So the broker has, honestly, and the broker is connected to the customer. So the broker has more power than the carrier in the relationship and the dynamic. And typically, you know, the insurance companies are begging for broker business rather than the broker begging for insurance mandates. Okay, fine if the broker is really small and has very few customers, but they don't last very long, you know. And so I would say to you that the intermediary, one, they have legal and regulatory responsibilities, which in the case of brokers that I meet and I know, they take them quite seriously. The insurance companies, yeah, fine, they market to the broker and they push their product to the broker saying it's the best, but the broker is a professional, qualified, makes decisions, and that broker's income comes from his long-term relationship with the client, not a one-shot, you know, buy and fly deal. And so I think that intermediated business actually is inherently fair in markets where there are enough providers. Where there's not enough providers, okay, fine, then it can be a bit tricky. In terms of everybody arriving at the same price, I mean, that happens in every market. You know, if you want to buy a can of soda, you know, there's not a giant price difference between, you know, the same flavors, the same sizes of cans. for insurance companies, they're working off the same data set, which will be population health. It'll be, crash data, or motor data. It'll be construction data, fire data, flood data. We're not, and all of the people have the same background in education and often come from the same company. They bounce around. So you'll eventually converge on at least the same price range. Where it becomes different is your service proposition, how well you treat your customer, how easy it is for the customer to deal with you, and how good your distribution is. Sorry, Mina, I didn't mean to jump in. It was just...
No, I mean, I concur with that. I think there is, there's, your insurance policy is essentially, it's a contract, right? So you have, two parties that are agreeing to the terms of the contract. The broker then is actually and there's a reason why people go to brokers. You might have your direct agents from the insurance company. Then you might have, third-party intermediaries, right, that are representing the products that they are selling. So there is obviously a lot of due diligence on the brokers to ensure that they are correctly advising the customers on what's being sold. But it's unfortunately there is a universal problem that we have where people tend to not really read the fine print, and unfortunately, you're going to create situations where customers are often buying into something that they don't fully understand. I mean, I am, amongst my network, I am the insurance friend. And, my network is, primarily expats, professionals, super accomplished, educated population of friends. But, whenever they get quotes for medical, for motor, they send them to me. And I always come back to them and I say, listen, I'm going to review it for you. I'm going to tell you, and explain some of the coverages and the exclusions, but you need to read it yourself. Now, whether they do or not is another question. But, this tends to happen, right? And unfortunately, it's not exclusive to insurance. You'll see this with financial service products, banking products, or other kind of contractual products that require you to really understand what you're buying into.
Yeah, actually, I want to also intervene on that. You guys are really like into the insurance space, and what I hear most of the time from my layman friends, nobody's happy when you talk about insurance. They're like, I hate my insurance, like I hate my bank, I hate my insurance, and stuff like that. When we talk about State Farm, it's like a mutual. It was at the origin, it was like a community-based or mutual insurance, which has now pivoted into becoming a mix of both. Okay, so it's community first, normally at the origin, and when you look at the origin of insurance, is something that is created for the better good of the community. Okay, which I will totally disagree that there's any good coming so far at what's happening. You mentioned something about the contract, and you say you have to be well educated. How many, I don't know, MBAs or PhD people or lawyers you bump into the street when you walk? There's not that many. So we're talking about proposing product for people who have not only, and by the way, you need to be a shrewd lawyers to understand the contract when it comes to the insurance, because it's not just an insurance contract that you get. You get a lot of stuffing inside the contract that even the best lawyers get full into the fine print. Okay, like the letter of the law or whatever. They will use all type, and I've been through M&A myself and selling companies, and then the lawyer comes to me, and even though I thought it was the right thing, said, no, but Murad, look at the fine print and letter of the law. And you can bring the best top lawyers sometimes, and they will miss out. And you're asking now a layman or even an educated guy who's not a lawyer. And by the way, the army of lawyers that the insurance industry are hiring is like insane as well, in order for you not to be able to even do anything. So again, when I go back to that, the contract and the fairness and everything is not on the side of the layman. It's not on the side of the people. So basically what you're telling me now, I should have a Mina Shahab friend in order for me to sign the contract with an insurance. Is that the
No,
case?
so
And you're telling me about the relationship
yeah,
that we should build up with the customer. I don't buy that. you know, you, you see what I mean?
one
We're in trouble.
so
We're in
one
trouble. Yeah.
one
I,
thing
I don't
I
think
will
so.
definitely say is that the insurance companies have a responsibility to ensure that their policy terms are understandable. And this is something actually I have championed with, the employers that I've worked with the customers that I've worked with. It's incredibly important. Even me sometimes, I mean, I'm from the industry and I look at some of these policy terms and conditions and I'm like, this, you know, barely makes sense, right? So 100%, it needs to be clear. It needs to be easily translatable. It needs to be in the right language. I mean, here, I can speak in terms of being in the MENA region, there's still a lot of policy terms and conditions here that are only in English, right? Where your customers might be Arabic speakers, right? It's incredibly important. So this is why I said it's a contract, right? Because there's a due diligence on all parties here. So there is a due diligence that the insurance company needs to make to ensure that the terms and conditions are not, legal and insurance terminology. And I think I've started to see more policies and quotes lately that are, made more for the common person to make it easy to understand. But the nature of insurance is it is a difficult product for many people to really fully comprehend. So you are going to have questions, and which is often why a lot of customers use brokers to better help them understand what they're actually buying into. I'm an ex-state farmer. I worked in property claims and I worked in motor claims. And I can only talk about my firsthand experience with them. When I was in claims, I was trained to
I
pay
don't
what.
want you to get into trouble because it's
No,
recorded. Speak freely,
listen.
but if you have to censor yourself, I'm okay with that too. You're dealing
I'm
with
being
insurance
true.
here. Yeah, yeah. Go
Absolutely.
ahead.
And the insurers are my clients. But I'm going to be very transparent here. My experience in claims at State Farm really made me fall in love with insurance because I was never encouraged to deny claims. In fact, there were sometimes cases where I would come back, to my boss when I was still a junior, and I would say, this looks like a rejection. And he would say, find somewhere in the policy term. We had this policy booklet, and I used to walk around with it, wherever I went when I went out on sites. And he would literally say, try to find somewhere in the policy that you could cover this claim. And that was essentially how I was trained. We were trained to pay what we owe. And we were bound by the policy terms and conditions. And I've seen how claims payments just turned people's lives around. So I think it's difficult to have an extreme position on this because I've seen firsthand how insurance can really help people. I myself, actually, just a couple of months ago, I had to deal with a medical condition and I needed to do some testing, and not one claim had been denied. I was covered as per my terms and conditions, so I understood what I was getting myself into when I purchased the policy. So I think there is, you're going to have the unfortunate situations, and as Killen said very early on, whole term life insurance is very complex, and there are a lot of unlicensed or untrained agents out there that are, kind of pushing the sales of these products without really educating the consumer here. And this is where obviously you need to have better auditing from the regulators in these places.
I think, Killian,
Moran. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
go ahead.
because I so I'm going to try and convert you a little bit to the insurance side of the fence, right? Because you seem to have a little bit of an extreme view. So the first thing about insurance is actually it can be quite difficult to like, because the topics that are being discussed in insurance are your life, which is your death, your health, which is your illness, or your car, which is your crash, right? And so it's, it doesn't sit right with the kind of the optimistic view or the happy view, because you have to consider something that's a negative experience. So this is the first thing. The second thing is that as an insurer, I mutualize the risk. You don't want it to happen. I don't want it to happen. This is the first thing. So when you buy car insurance, you buy it because you have to. You don't want to crash. I don't want you to crash. We're on the same page. Okay, we're 100% on the same page. If you go through 12 months and you don't crash, I'm happy. You wasted your money. So straight away, it starts to diverge in terms of our alignment, right? And if you do crash, I want to know the details of the crash. I want to know, was it your liability, his liability? Are you covered for you and him or just him? If you're covered for him, I need to talk to him directly, and I kind of leave you out the conversation completely. And then it's reflected, because if you cost me a lot of money, I say, Murad, we have had a good relationship, but you cost me a lot of money last year. I made a loss. I need to increase your premiums because you're not a great driver. Then I'm now doing the thing that people hate saying. I'm saying you're not a great driver. Everybody's a great driver. I'm saying you're not a great driver. So as an insurer, the way that we have to manage the relationship with the person, it's actually quite complex. I have to, if you don't crash, I have to sort of demonstrate that you got value for money that year. That's very hard for me to do. Insurers are trying to do that by increasing their touch points with people, by saying, hey, you're a great driver. I'm going to give you a discount because you were such a good driver. But I still have to charge you. If you have an accident and you're in the wrong, we have to pay up for sure. And I have to reflect that in the relationship that we have financially. I have to do it. And so we try to manage it the best we can, I would say. And I think that what happens is, if you're the victim, if somebody hits you and you have a good experience from me as your insurer for your own damage, or if you're sick and I help you go through the hospital process, just like Mina when she needed to get the tests, you kind of feel it's worthwhile. And that will carry me for a while, a year or two. But eventually you'll start, if you're healthy again, you start saying, I'm wasting my money. And there are times when I have to say no. Like in any relationship, there are times when I have to say no. And the reason I'm saying no is, you didn't buy that from me, so how can I give it to you? Or you've used it up and there's no more left. And I completely agree with Mina that from the day one in insurance, we were taught that it's not just a technical assessment, there's a moral obligation that comes with that technical assessment. If you feel that someone may be outside of the technical requirements for a claim, it doesn't mean it shouldn't be paid. It means that there's a discussion to be had. If you feel it as the claims assessor and you want to take that on as your mission to try and get the person paid, even though they might not be fully in the zone. And I've worked with many, many insurers. I've never, ever worked on an insurer where they said that this is a hard no. Never. So, I would say that there's an obligation on you as a customer, one, to understand what you bought. I mean, genuinely, if you have a complaint about insurance, have you ever read your policy? Have you ever called the insurer and asked them what certain things meant? Because they'll tell you. Have you gone through it with your broker to understand what I can and cannot claim? Have you looked in Price Shop to see, is it good value? Have you done reviews to see, are they 5-star, 3-star, 2-star insurers? I will guarantee you, out of every 10 customers, 9 have not. But they feel entitled to complain. And sure they are. I mean, why not complain? Go for it. But really, this isn't a trivial purchase. It's a purchase, like I said, your health, it's your car, it's your life. These are big deals.
Look, I agree with you that there is a two-party relationship. And that's where I will leave it at, because for me, I understand one thing. I mean, as a layman, again, I will talk in the layman perspective. You just, I'm obligated to buy an insurance, car insurance, whatever. And I don't want to go into detail now. The latest flood in Dubai, where people insure the Tesla, and eventually the insurance went back and say, oh, sorry, a flood happened. We didn't expect a flood happening in this country. And then all those Tesla owners got the insurance premium shooting up, or they even got the insurance canceled. So
Yeah.
I don't see where the fairness was. I mean, in that things, should I be aware of me buying a Tesla in the Middle East where I know that it never rain, and for the insurance on the writing, the like flood will never happen in this country, and but again, so many people now have been like left with unpaid claims and so on and so forth. And I can bring you article on that. When it comes to the insurance fairness and everything, I would totally agree with you if both interests are aligned. Okay, if we go back to a mutual principle where the insurance mutual is like working for the benefit of the community. But in the insurance business of today's, the insurance are owned by stakeholders. So I agree with Mina saying she's doing a great job as being the good cop in a company. Say, I'm going to try to find out how to pay claim as much as I can. But it might be a case where, at the end of the day, if she allows so many claims to happen, you will also make the insurance stakeholder lose money. So there's in a sense, you cannot, give to one part and keep to the other part. The insurance has to be a profitable business at the end of the day. It is a business that has to be profitable. Okay, so this is the conflict where you see with people being very upset with the insurance, hey, I didn't read this fin line, and we go back now to the contract. You have to do this necessary work in order for you to make sure you know what you're getting into it. One case, I was talking to one of the lawyers, insurance lawyer, and he was telling us, Murad, in a case of wildfires happening in California, so housing were getting burned, and then many insurance were either working out or they were trying to settle claim in at a low rate in order to close deal. They were according to him, and it's based on the contract, they were making it very difficult. We're talking of big name insurance, making very difficult for you to even process the claim and findable on the website, on the contract, on everything. So in order for you to really waste your time with lawsuit or lawyers, guys, because if I'm a layman and I got my insurance to be paid and I'm going to hire now a lawyer to help me fill up my claim, I better settle quickly with the insurance. So you cannot, Killing. I understand where you're coming from. I understand the need of the insurance, but there's a reality on the ground that people are not happy with. And for me, if you want to bring the insurance model into insurtech and a visionary future of the insurance industry, is not on putting more AI to control me, not giving me a smart device to make sure that I don't do anything, that I get my claim even going out because somebody next to me was smoking, whatever. It's you have to find the insurance, if they want to be still relevant in the next decade or more, they need to also be more transparent. So I want to see where the money is going. Hence, blockchain, maybe, I don't know. Not only finding me more way to be unclear, I would say. That's what I am trying to say. If we have more transparency in what's happening in the industry for the layman, then there is more thing. I don't want to read heavy contract. I don't want to be hey, I forgot these two words that says no. I cannot have this type of doctors, and I have to go to the low type of doctors to get my health. I don't want to jeopardize with my health. So if you promise to me a full coverage on that, then at the end of the day, say no, actually no, that's not. We're going to give you half heart surgery. That's what the deal is. No, I don't want that. So bring me more hope into this industry, because you will not convince me, not only me, but the billions of people who are to try to understand what's happening.
But you're so I hear you, and I suppose I'm fascinated by how your view is formed. Right, for a start, I think that insurance companies are probably misrepresented a lot because it's a easy way to sell column inches. Publishing a story saying that we'll say an insurance company paid out $100 million because of the fires is not as interesting as a homeowner struggled for 50 years, lost his home in the fire, and the insurance company didn't pay out. So this is the first point. And the second point is the insurers never bothered to publish the good stuff. It's something that really pains me about insurers all the time, is that they actually don't, if you like, toot their own horn or blow their own trumpet by saying, hey, we did a fantastic job this year. We saved 50 lives. We did 1,000 heart operations. We delivered 1,000 babies. We saved the lives of 50 kids, which, by the way, they do on a daily basis. All of them. All of them do it on a daily basis in volumes that would astound you. Okay. They don't tell
But
the world, right?
to be fair, that is their job. That's what they get paid for. So you shouldn't celebrate doing your job, right?
I know I will, but also I'm doing my job when I tell somebody that their claim isn't covered. It isn't. If they didn't pay for it, then why should I give it to them for free, right? And then you can say, well, and then you made a very good statement saying, I don't want to read the document. I don't want to have to go through all that. I'm sorry, but if you did an M&A, your lawyer pointed it out to you, you went through it. And the consequences of an M&A are far less than consequences of poor health, death, or a car crash. Far less. And so I would say to you, you can make that claim or that statement as a citizen. Anyone can, but they're being irresponsible. Commit, engage with the contract, understand the protection that you're buying, decide if you're getting value for money, decide if you trust the carrier, and then go for it. But this idea that I can spend 2 minutes making the decision and buying the policy, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Just to add on to that, I would say, honestly, if you don't understand it, don't buy it.
Don't buy it.
Guys, I'm sorry. I have to jump in here. This is like blaming obese people for being obese, right? They're saying, well, why don't they eat less? And then you realize that the food has been genetically modified. They're poor, so they cannot afford healthy food. Healthy food is extremely expensive. There are all kinds of reasons, and usually systemic reasons, that cause them to end up being obese. I'm not saying all obese people are like that. Some people have responsibility, obviously. And so there's a systemic problem here. Mina, you said it yourself. Some of these contracts barely make sense. And it is a really high bar to expect people to read legal contracts and understand them as well as the lawyers do. And essentially, that's what legal contracts, why lawyers are hired to read legal contracts, because most people cannot understand them, even the most well-educated people. And if you bring a product like insurance, right, which to your point, Killian, is extremely important, and you give it to people and they don't understand them, and then when they complain about it, you're like, well, you didn't read the contract. That feels like that's the opposite moral obligation. That's like the moral obligation gone haywire, because there was a moral obligation to make sure they understood to begin with. Otherwise, you shouldn't be selling this thing, right? Because then it's on you that it's false advertising. It's like, because the insurance company has tons and tons and tons of data. They're not selling one policy to one ignorant consumer. They're selling a bunch of policies to many, many ignorant consumers. And to use that excuse of saying, well, then they didn't read the thing and didn't understand it, that's their fault. That is like, I'm sorry, but you've been doing this for long enough time that you know that people are not going to read it. This is why very often terms and conditions, when it comes to a court of law, they're thrown out completely, because they're like, nobody's expected to read it. This is hidden. This stuff is hidden, and nobody reads it. So I don't know. This doesn't, again, from the perspective where I'm standing, I'm like, we need to do more. Industry needs to do more.
But Shireen, I hear you, right? I hear this quite regularly from people say, yes, it's a legal contract and it's too difficult for me to understand. Read it. It's not. A third party liability contract is pretty straightforward. You crash into somebody, I will take care of them. That's pretty much it. It's not in detailed, very technical, hard to understand stuff. It's pretty straightforward, that type of contract. Medical contract, they do it by disease. If you feel that you're going to be vulnerable to any of the following diseases, this is how I will cover you. Private room, semi-private room. They will give you limits. They will say up to an amount. It's very easy to read. It's very easy to read. If you're talking about a life contract, which is whole of life, which has an investment component, very technical, probably would need a lawyer genuinely to understand it. If you're talking about a home property contract, it's super easy to read. Fire, burns down, what's the value of your house? I replace. Contents, give me the value. If it's real value, if I think it's real value, because some people inflate it, I'll pay you. They're very straightforward. Now, where you have difficulties, sometimes is who's liable for the accident. That's a different thing. And with the fire case, that could be the issue. Oftentimes, with big tragedies or very large scale damage, what the insurance companies do is they try to say to you, rather than me do a full analysis to work out exactly how much you need, I will pay you this amount because you need the cash now. I don't know if I'm killing myself and it's too expensive for me or if it's too cheap for me, but I know that probably on the balance of probabilities across all the numbers, it'll roughly work out. And they will have a mathematician to do that. And they do it. And on individual cases, when people believe they're treated unfairly, they very rarely look at themselves and say, well, I'd not take responsibility for my purchase. I didn't read my contract. I didn't trust my broker. I didn't come in. I didn't do it. They will say the bloody insurance companies, these big multi-billion-dollar companies, who, by the way, make 2 to 3% margin, which is far less than the margin that a lot of other companies across the planet make. But they trust the other companies. They don't trust us. It's too easy. It's too easy. I really feel that if there's anything that people need to do is that they need to actually step up and understand the protection they bought, even at the highest level, and not claim ignorance and poor me when something happens and it gets denied. You're paying money for something. You have an obligation and responsibility to understand what you bought. If it doesn't happen to come true on the reading of the contract, all the company.
Let me maybe let me pivot this
Mina,
a
you
little,
probably I
just
agree or
a little
disagree,
bit.
but
No, I agree with you. And I wanted to actually just follow up on what I was saying originally, is that when I said, if you don't understand it, don't buy it. That's just that's just basic common sense. In a competitive business environment, you're shopping around, right? So if it doesn't make sense with company A, I'm going to go to company B and take a look at their quote, right? Now, what I will say is that I think this has improved a lot. With digitalization, we're seeing improved user journeys. I was telling you guys that I bought a medical insurance policy recently, and I went through a WhatsApp chatbot conversation with the insurance company. And what was beautiful about the journey was they actually listed to me, they firstly asked me my declarations, and it was an interactive chatbot. So I listed them, and then it said, it reiterated it back to me. And then it actually went through my covers and my exclusions, my limits, and made me fully understand them. And after listing every single line item, it said, do you understand? And I thought that was brilliant, right? Because it simplified the process for the customer. It made it easy for them to understand. So definitely, I'm kind of in between here, because I understand your perspective, Murad and Shireen. There's responsibility that when you are selling a product, that there has to be full transparency on what the product is and what the product is going to look like at the point of a claim. But I'm also very much with Killen here, sorry, is it in that, I think there is a lot of noise sometimes. And for those of us that have worked inside the insurance industry, we've seen how it actually takes play. I worked in regulatory complaints for a long time when I came here to the Middle East, and I used to see the complaints that come in. Believe it or not, there were sometimes customers that had purchased, medical policies or through their company needed to do declarations. And declarations are just a basic tenet of the insurance underwriting process, right? As an insurance company, I need to know if you have diabetes, right? Because that will impact the pricing of that pool of risk that group that I'm insuring. And the number of claims we used to get that would come in as a complaint saying, why aren't you covering this? There is literally on the application form very clearly saying, declare all of your existing or pre-existing medical conditions. So this happens. I don't think it's intentional sometimes from the consumer. I think sometimes consumers don't understand that if they don't declare these conditions, then the insurance company has a right to deny that claim or to minimize payment on the claim at the time of at the time of submission. But I think it's there is a big gray area here. It's not as black and white.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so
Shireen, go ahead.
I do agree with what you guys are saying. And for every, good thing, you can also make the opposite claim, right? So on the case of Mina, you were trained to try to pay claims. I also have many stories from insiders.
I was
The
trained
opposite
to
is true,
pay
where
what
they were,
I owe.
yes,
Yeah,
to
what you
pay
owe,
what you
yeah.
owe. Exactly. Perfect. Yes. Apologies. I also have many insiders who have told me the opposite, where they were trained to try to look for the exclusions and not pay, right? And a lot of these exclusions would not make very much sense to most people. So for every side, you can say there's good and there's bad. And now don't forget, I'm also in the industry, so I'm with you guys on this. I'm not trying to shoot myself. All I'm saying is, how can we create a systemic solution to this, because this is a problem of, to Murad's point, a lack of transparency and a clear lack of proper onboarding. So I really like what you described there, Mina, with this chat bot and this effort to make people to be able to communicate with people in the way that they're accustomed to, so that you're not asking them to read a legal contract, which nobody will do. We know this for a fact. So why do we keep insisting that they have to read the contract? I mean, they're not going to. Simple. And they're going to keep complaining, and they're going to keep being annoyed about it because we haven't made the effort to talk to them at their level or in the way that they're used to. So as an industry, there needs to be a change, a very, very big change. If we expect people to embrace what we're doing, then we're gonna have to do what is best for them and not hide behind this, well, they didn't read the contract. Because at the end of the day, that's not gonna fly. Eventually the people will be like, well, and it's already happening, people will be really upset, and the industry already has a really, really bad name.
Do you know, I don't know that the industry has a really bad name. I really don't. And I guess I wouldn't be proud to be an insurer if it had a bad name, right? What I think is that, the voice of the complaint, the single complaint, is far louder than the millions of people who were dealt with fairly and who got exactly the right service from the insurance companies, because it's better news, right? And I don't think that we need to change the industry at all, right? I mean, there's a couple of levers, right? The first lever is if you didn't have to buy car insurance, you won't, and maybe you would for a new car, but there's a vast majority of people won't buy it. They won't buy it because they don't see the value. They don't see the value because they don't claim every year, which is probably a good thing. For health insurance, it's pretty expensive. It's not expensive because of the insurer. It's expensive because of the hospitals and the treatments from the hospitals. And I mean, let's do a very quick test. How many insurers do you know that drive Bentleys? Very few. But there's a heck of a lot of doctors and clinicians drive at least one. And so where does the money go, right? We're a payer. We pay repair shops. We pay medical providers on your behalf. And you pay me a small amount of money, I pay them a big amount of money. 80% of my customers won't have an issue. The 20% that do will benefit from everybody else's contribution. That's how it works. And it's social good. It's done for society. Yeah, there's a profit in it, but check the profit margins on the companies. They're quite low, 2 to 3%. And I'll tell you something else. In each company, there's a product committee. And the product committees, they look at the loss ratios. And if they have a product and people are not claiming on that product, the product committee will actually either insist on bringing the prices down, or they will question the validity of the product. And this is, again, partly regulation, because the regulators look at it. But if we have a product where we're making supernormal profit, we will adjust it to make a modest profit, because we are obliged to offer something that people get value from. Tell me another company that does that. I doubt there's any. but it happens in insurance. So yeah, they get a bad name. And yeah, maybe the State Farm issue was genuinely an issue, but State Farm, they paid up, right? They put their hand up. They may not have said guilty, but they paid up. How many other
But they have to be
companies
sued.
that would do that? I mean, there's very few. There's very few, right?
No, look, like you mentioned, every industry has to make a living, and I think that the evolution of the insurance has changed. Like I say, back then it was mostly mutual insurance that were existing, and we moved more into a private model. As you mentioned, uh, it has to make sense, and the profit seeking has to be there. If you lose money, you cannot exist anymore, and then you cannot bring this greater value back to the community as a whole. And if you don't exist, it becomes more harm to the whole society. Totally agree with you on that. The thing is, like, as I say, the contract, as we know, you have to read it. It's not that nobody wants to read it. The issue here that we're facing is that after reading the contract and understanding the way it is, because most of the 99ers would just understand the plain English that is presented to them. They will not understand the underlying or the stuffing of the wording that is inside. In the case of the people who are insuring their home for life, for fires and stuff like that, when I recall the story, it's when you go to do the claiming of this incident or the sinistre, you have to be surrounded by lawyers literally to find out exactly what was wrong within the claim itself. And then there's an association of lawyers who are ex-insurers, by the way, who understand the intricacy of the insurance, who come to help out and say, this is how you can go about it now, because we understand we are insiders. And we are going to help you. They're going to help the layman as an association, because they cannot cover the cost of getting a lawyer. Either you settle quickly and you lose half of your property, okay? Or you're going to bring everything that you're supposed to. For example, they were like, you have to determine every single tools that has been used to build your house. Give us like a detailed pro forma invoice from the constructor itself. And they're like, how can I get that? So they go to the construction or the, whatever company and ask them, hey, can you label it by nails even? How many nails? And they're like, if you overestimate on that, that's the case. And if you overestimate, they might look at your case as a fraudulent case because you have put too many nails into the house. And the guys, they don't have time, And you know what the guy was telling me? He's like, I'm a construction guy. I want to help my client. I want to help them, but I have other priorities to build home. And when I give you an estimate to build your home, I don't go to this granular, how many glue, how many tiles, Huh?
Listen, you're listening to, in Ireland, we call this pub chat, okay? The guy sits next to you at the bar and he says, I won't believe it. I did a claim. I had to get the price of nails. Then
I'm telling you, I'll send you the podcast. I'll send you the insurance guy. The guy was with us. They rejected the claim.
Yeah, but it's a story. I'm telling you, it doesn't work like that in insurance, right? You have a thing called property replacement value. There's a value put on it. If I accept the value as an insurer, I pay you the price, right? There might be a salvage negotiation because not all of your property will be damaged. Some of your stuff might be salvageable. We can make a deal. I'll take it all. I'll take the salvage. I'll pay you the whole amount. It's really straightforward, right? But it's a good story. I like it though. I would sit and listen to that guy.
Don't discount this because this was actual lived experience, right? So you are also, what you're saying is also a story, in my opinion. You're telling me, well, from what I've seen in my insurance companies, this is how it's done. And somebody else from a different insurance company is saying, well, from what I've experienced, this is how it's done. And I work
But he's
on a
not.
certain insurance company.
No, Shireen, he was a construction guy, right? Because
No.
these customers.
This was from multiple sources. We're talking
It
about
never
something
happens.
from
I'm
multiple
telling
sources.
you. But it's good. It's a good story.
Okay, no,
I like it.
you do
I
not.
would
I'm
really
sorry,
enjoy
you
it.
do not get to discount a lived experience and somebody who's come and told the story and said it never happened just because you don't believe it happened. And the point of this is that there is no
No,
transparency. How do
I'm
you know
pretty
that what
sure,
you're
like
claiming
99%.
is true? Well, you're wrong. So that 1% chance has happened because it did happen. It's a documented thing, etc. So again,
As
but
far as
you
I'm
are now
concerned,
telling
it's a
a
story. I'm
story,
telling you, it's a story.
and
The
as far
price
as
of
I'm
nails
concerned,
in
you're
an
telling
insurance
me
claim.
your
They
story
have a
from
laugh.
your perspective. And the point here is that there's no transparency. And this is what we're saying. There's no transparency. Then you can tell whatever story you want, and the other guy can tell whatever the story he wants. And how do we know who's telling the truth? All right, guys. This
Can
has
I
been a
chime in here?
fascinating conversation.
Jump
Yes,
in,
yes,
yeah, Jim.
yes. Last words for
Do you mind,
everyone
Shireen?
around this table, and
Last
then we're wrapping it up.
last words. You're definitely going to have bad stories, good stories. You're going to have bad employees, bad claims managers that are telling their adjusters, you know what, reject this claim. You're going to have good claims managers that are going to say, you know what, pay what you owe. This is going to happen, right? It's unfortunate. So the stories that everybody's telling here, I'm sure, have actually happened on the ground, right? And I myself, I mean, I'm from the industry. I've worked in the industry. I can tell you good stories and bad stories, right? It is a reality. But to answer your question, because you posed a very important question, you said, how can we really improve the systemically? How can we really advance the industry, right? And I think Killen mentioned a very important point. The providers, whether they're medical providers, whether they are repairers for vehicles, you know, Murad, you mentioned the dropping of EV insurers, right? The reason why they're dropping them is because the repair costs for
Yes.
EV vehicles are through the roof. And it's unbelievable. And I mean, literally, insurers just cannot afford it anymore, right? So you know, and then you have, you know, the wildfire. Why are all these insurance companies trying to leave California right now? Is because the construction costs are through the roof, right? So, you know, this is where it's important that insurance companies start partnering up with the right partners, right? You can partner up with the right partners to get, you know, whole discounts on repairs if you have the right provider, if you have the right network of garages. If you're working with the right medical network, then you can, you know, negotiate and have caps on costs for services and treatments. These partnerships are so critical in the insurance ecosystem to ensure that you're still being able to provide affordable insurance for your consumers, but also being able to cover your costs and be profitable as an insurance company as well. I mean, there's many things to do. That's just one idea, right? But this came up with the discussion, and I mean, I think, you know, what Takadao is doing with this P2P community platform, enabling the communities to empower each other, I think is fantastic, right? And I think that takes us back to the principle of insurance at the end of the day. But let's not take away the social good as well that we have seen from insurance companies globally. But again, you're going to get your good apples, your bad apples, your good stories, your bad stories. So I'll end it with that.
So I suppose, firstly, I agree with being actually a very balanced view. But the discussion on transparency in insurance is probably a bit difficult, okay, because of the number of moving parts that are in any insurance value chain. What I do think is that I do think that the element of trust needs to be reinforced by proper communications from an insurer to the customer on the value that they give to the customer. I also think that the insurer, because they have insights into the customers, they can offer some of that insight back to the customer and share with them. Okay. It doesn't completely close the gap, but at least it creates a sense of a relationship. And very often the relationship is, I pay you on 1st of January and you ask me to pay you on the 31st of December and I pay you on the 1st of January. And I think in no way does that encourage or influence a good relationship, and it doesn't give anything back to a customer who hasn't made a claim, maybe a discount. I do also like the idea of the DAO, right? The DAO approach to insurance is actually quite interesting because it allows the mutual to be reinvented, and it allows communities to be created that can offer insurance in, I suppose, more of a discretionary community basis. I can decide to be part of that community and I can decide to participate in the rules of that community. And I do think you're going to see if you like, traditional models, which was the original model, more at which you referred to a few times, being reinvented thanks to technology. And we've seen a couple of attempts at it, which were really good. Some of them, like Bought My Many for insurance, people like this had really great ideas, but the technology wasn't there. But with DAO and blockchain, I think it's almost there. And if you're doing something in that space, actually, I think you're in a great space. I think you're in a great space. And I do think also that the traditional insurance models need to be challenged for sure, right? Because the barriers to entry are so high that, in fairness to the insurers, they're not under pressure from newcomers. And perhaps in the future, with a bit of healthy competition from new propositions, you might actually see even a boost. I don't think that there'll be much more value squeezed out of your insurance premiums or insurance contracts because it's already pretty tight. I would love to see, like what Mina said, the providers being a bit more disciplined, and people getting behind insurers to actually manage the providers rather than encouraging the providers to screw the insurers. That would be an interesting one. But the topic is good, but super complex, super complex.
Murad, your final thoughts?
Sorry to have been like a devil advocate, but to make actually the frontier move a little bit, because we're all in the same industry, is really important that we challenge ourselves, and especially for our audience. You know, we want people to partake into what we try to do because we love this industry, and we love this industry so much, as Celine was mentioning. It's that we care about people, and that's the origin of the insurance model. And we have to put back the human in the center of everything. And unfortunately, we live in an economical system, a very inflationary inflation. It's getting off the roof. Things are happening, and then you have to make decisions. You know, if I insure myself a few years ago for whatever, and then the inflation is kicking in, then what do we do? So we see all these things happening. It's not even sometimes part of the insurance industry itself, but what's going around the industry, as you mentioned, the EV and everything. Like that. But for sure, it's something we all care about, and I think that the changes needs to take place for sure. And we're happy to see that there's so much technology being able to help us out. Actually, when you see blockchain, AI, and traceability, and making the cost of those minute action or within the insurance model being reduced. And that's why when I look at the insurtech space that is happening, that the automatization of verifying claim, chatbots happening, and everything will reduce the cost of thousands of people being behind the insurance industry. It reduce the cost, and the cost is definitely going back to the consumer at the end of the day, and that's what is important. And thank you again for clarifying on the the limitation of what the insurance tech and how highly checked and regulated they are. And I will check on my doctor if he's still driving a Bentley or not, because that's something that I need to go. And I will send it. I will say that's not my quote. I just want to make sure I open your garage and you're not hiding this Bentley down the garage. The last I saw him, he was driving a Lexus. Yeah, not a Bentley. No.
So thank you everyone for having been on this call, and I think all of you have valid points, and I believe that insurance is an important industry, as Murad has said, and it is something to help people. And I do believe that it's developed in such a way that we have today because it was constantly trying to do what was best for people. I think there's good intentions behind it, but systemically we have some issues, and I think they can be fixed with a much higher degree of transparency. But I hope this conversation also gave us a little bit of insights on, as Murad said, the limitations of an insurer. So there's a lot of misunderstanding. The public doesn't know what is going on, how the sausage is made at all. And this causes them to resent, right? Because all they see is insurance is a $9 trillion a year industry. There's $40 trillion AUM. Why are they not paying my measly $50,000? That's all they can see, because we're not doing enough to communicate. And so I think this is I hope what we're trying to do here with this podcast. Thank you all of you for having come to the show. I hope this was enjoyable. And No hard feelings. Anything that was said on Taka Talk stays on Taka Talk.
I'm going to check the price of nails in California. It seems to be a good investment.